The Whispering Pines. In the lush emerald valley of Elder Glen, nestled between misty mountains and a winding silver river, lived two animal lovers, Mira and Elias. They had met years ago at a wildlife sanctuary, both drawn to the quiet dignity of creatures others overlooked. The injured fox with a limp, the orphaned fawn, the old raven who croaked wisdom from the tallest pine. They built a life together in a small cottage on the edge of the forest, where birds nested in their eaves and deer grazed in the meadow at dawn. Mira, with her gentle hands and endless patience, nursed wounded animals back to health. Elias, quiet and observant, mapped migration patterns and spoke to owls in soft whistles that echoed through the trees. Together, they were a sanctuary, not just for animals, but for each other. Their days were simple: feeding the rescued raccoons, checking traps for injured creatures, planting native flowers for the bees. At night, they sat on the porch, wrapped in woolen blankets, listening to the symphony of crickets and frogs, their fingers entwined. But the valley had a secret. Beneath its beauty ran ancient fault lines, sleeping for centuries. The elders spoke of the earth's breath, a time when the mountains would shudder and the rivers would rise. One summer, the rains came heavier than anyone remembered. Day after day, the sky wept. The river swelled, swallowing the banks, turning the meadow into a lake. Then, on a moonless night, the earth groaned. It began with a low rumble, like distant thunder. Then the ground split. Trees toppled, boulders rolled, and the river burst its banks in a roaring flood. Mira and Elias scrambled to gather the animals they could. Cages of rabbits, the blind old dog, the injured hawk in its mended wing cast. "We have to get to higher ground," Elias shouted over the wind. They led the animals uphill, but the path collapsed beneath them. A landslide tore through the forest, separating them in an instant. Mira, clutching the cage with the hawk, was swept into a gully. Elias reached for her, but the earth opened between them. "Mira!" he screamed, but the storm drowned his voice. When dawn broke, the valley was unrecognizable. The cottage was gone, buried under mud and stone. The river had carved a new path. Elias searched for days, calling her name through the wreckage, leaving trails of feathers and animal tracks, signals only she would understand. Mira survived, carried by the floodwaters to a distant ridge. She woke with the hawk still in her arms, its golden eyes blinking in the light. With no food, no shelter, she followed the flight of birds northward, trusting instinct over memory. Months passed. Elias rebuilt a small shelter deep in the surviving woods. He cared for the few animals that returned: foxes, a lone wolf pup, the old raven. He left food and water at the old meadow, hoping. Mira, farther north, found refuge with a community of conservationists. She healed. She taught them about forest medicine, about listening to the language of animals. But every night, she placed a pine cone on her windowsill, Elias's signal. "I'm alive. I remember." One spring morning, a raven landed on her sill. It tilted its head, then dropped a small, carved wooden fox at her feet. The kind Elias used to make for her. Her breath caught. She packed her things, left a note, and followed the ravens. Weeks later, near the ruins of Vare Valley, she saw smoke rising through the trees, and there, by a fire, was Elias, older, bearded, whistling a tune only one person in the world knew. He looked up. Their eyes met. No words, just the sound of the wind, the rustle of leaves, and the soft coo of a dove nesting in the pines. Life returning. They had been torn apart by the fury of nature, but held together by love, memory, and the quiet language of the wild. And in the end, the animals led them home,